Welcome to the Body Peace Podcast, formerly known as Her Story on a Plate. This podcast has always been a space for deep, nuanced conversations about food, body image, and the stories our bodies carry. But as conversations have grown, so has our mission.
That's why this is now the Body Peace Podcast, a name that reflects what we're truly here for, helping you step off the battlefield with your body and move toward more compassion, connection, and ease.
Each episode will bring real, honest dialogue with your hosts, me, I'm Jennie Kramer,
and me, Nina Manolson. We'll also be joined by guests whose personal stories and professional wisdom offer new ways of thinking, feeling, and being in your body.
We're so glad you're here. Welcome to the Body Peace Podcast.
This conversation with Ragen Chastain is what we all need to hear before we go to the doctor, before we go to the gym, before we even get on a plane. We can't wait for you to dive into this conversation about health and weight with Ragen's keen analytical perspective. Throughout this whole conversation, I wanted to pull out my little yellow highlighter to remember the gems.
And what a joy to have Ragen. She is a speaker, writer, researcher, board-certified patient advocate, and a thought leader in weight science, weight stigma, health, and healthcare. Ragen is author of the Weight and Healthcare newsletter and co-author of the Health at Every Size, or HAES, Health Sheets. She's frequently featured as an expert in print, radio, television, documentary film, and now our podcast. In her free time, Ragen is a national dance champion, triathlete, and marathoner who holds the Guinness World Record for heaviest woman to complete a marathon. Ragen Chastain, so happy to have you with us today. I know you in so many different arenas, but I have to ask a very compelling question before we do anything else. Is it actually true that you hold the Guinness World Records for the heaviest woman to complete a marathon?
Yes, that is actually true.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I think.
Have you completed more than one?
Yeah, I've done a couple. I actually did one. I had a freak neck injury and I couldn't do any of the things I actually like. And so the doctor was like, really, it's pretty much walking for the next 20-ish weeks. And it turned out that in 20 weeks was the Seattle Marathon, which is where my best friend lives. And so in order to have motivation to do these walks, I asked him and he agreed immediately to do it with me. And then when it was over, I found out I could have gotten the world record. And I was like, oh, fabulous. I'll send my finish time. They'll send me another medal. It's fantastic. But it turns out there's so much you have to do to get that record. Yeah. So I had to do a whole second one to do that. Wow. It was interesting. It was supposed to be, I did it in Maine and it was supposed to be 60 degrees and like sunny, but in the trees, so it was shaded. It ended up being 40 degrees. There were 20-mile-an-hour winds and it rained the whole time, which made it a super interesting experience. And the course was supposed to be flat and it ended up being like 3 big hills that you just kept going up and down in a circle endlessly. One thing I always want to say though, whenever I talk about this is that I enjoy doing fitnessy things and I enjoy medals. And so that's why I did it. But I really want to be clear that there's this like good fatty, bad fatty dichotomy thing that happens where people treat fat people who perform health in certain ways better. And I end up being privileged by that. So I want to kill it. Mm-hmm. Right. I've done both. I can tell you for sure, completing a Netflix marathon and completing a marathon are morally equivalent activities. If you're as slow as me, they're also an option just to an entire day. But yeah, so I do want to be clear about that.
I like this Netflix marathon thing. Okay. But
indeed.
Okay.
But Ragen, what it brings me into is this something I really wanted to talk to you about is let's talk about our relationship as women with movement. Because I know from my work with women that there's this, oh, I'm good if I'm doing exercise. And I'm using that words very specifically. And I'm good if I'm exercising and I'm bad if I'm just on a sofa watching a Netflix marathon. And I should exercise, but I don't want to exercise and my body hurts. And so I don't really have the inclination. And I was never, this is me now. I was never a competitor. I don't want to compete. I don't want to get a medal, right? So there's so many issues and barriers around moving in our bodies that I just want to just put that on the table and let's unpack that.
Yeah. And there's a lot to unpack there. I think a huge part of it is diet culture,
Mhm.
right? We're never actually able to create some sort of authentic relationship with movement for many people because diet culture starts so early. I mean, right now, the American Academy of Physicians is recommending intensive behavioral weight loss interventions as young as 2 years old. How are you ever going to develop any kind of relationship with fitness or movement if that's something you want to do and it's not an obligation at all, right? If from 2 years old you learn that movement is prevention of or punishment for being fat, there's no way to do that.
Let me just say that again. I want to take my yellow highlighter and just run over what you just said. Prevention for and
Yes.
punitive. It's either preventative or
Yes.
it's punitive, right? And what you're saying there is so worth repeating because that's the relationship that we're
Mhm.
taught
Right.
to be in with our body and with
Yes.
movement. And that's
It
heartbreaking.
really is. And it's toxic fitness culture, as Ilya Parker defines it with decolonizing fitness, who's someone in this space who you absolutely must know and follow, doing incredible work. I got my first fitness certification in 1996, just out of high school. It was part of how I paid for college. And I was fully steeped in diet culture at the time, making all kinds of mistakes and doing all kinds of harm with my little Madonna mic from the stage and as a trainer. And so it's something that as I transitioned away from diet culture and into a weight neutral and fat affirming paradigm, I really had to work on, right? What does this look like? How is this different? How can I stop perpetuating toxic fitness culture, even if I want to still be involved in fitness because it's something that I enjoy?
What helped you make those transitions?
What always helps me, getting mad about what had happened before, about what I had been taught and what I had perpetuated and taught others.
Hmm.
And then examining it from what if I started this from scratch? Right? What would I do? And I teach classes about, I have a workshop called Getting Jiggly with It. That's about movement in a fat body. And I hear from a lot of people who had real messy breakups with exercise, right? Dodgeball, the president's physical fitness test, anti-fatness as
Dodgeball. Oh God.
none of
Got a
these
minute?
things are, again,
Dodgeball was like shame
oh my
ball.
God, it was like paintball. My gym classes were co-ed. Like it was, the whole thing.
Traumatic. Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I think is important for people to know is you can come to this completely on your own terms, which means,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in all the folks we all work with, there is this distinction that we have to make between body movement and exercise, because body movement is everything that gets you from here to there, right? Exercise is, as we've said, sometimes punishment, sometimes some discipline. And I think it's such an important thing for anyone to move their body to the degree that they can, if they can, when they want to, if they want to. There is no prescription about it. And most people report in all size bodies that when they at least make the attempt to move their bodies, they actually feel better physically. So if they can, it's a great idea. And if they can't, it isn't some moral mistake they've made.
Yeah. There are so many ways to support ourselves, our health, if that's something that we want to do. And movement is one of those things, but there's lots of options. And I'm always one for picking low hanging fruit, right? So stress management and social connection or more sleep is low hanging fruit, and movement is like a few therapy sessions away. That's totally reasonable. And punishing ourselves for not engaging. And for some people, it's just not a thing. Some people are contraindicated. Some people have conditions that, like chronic pain that gets worse with movement. And some people just don't want to do it, which is fully valid. One of the things for me is like on your own terms means try things, quit things. I think the joy of quitting is something that I try to teach people to rediscover in terms of movement, because it's no longer like you joined the junior high softball team and you're going to keep this, like you're a grown person. You can try 5 minutes of that class and you can leave, right? You can try. And that's success.
I feel a book coming. Oh my God, I feel a book coming. The joy of quitting.
Yeah.
Great.
The joy of quitting. But it reminds me, there's a client I had that she said, so it was like the first session, what kind of movement should I do? I'm going to this kind of trainer and this kind of trainer. I was like, well, what do you
Yeah,
actually enjoy?
exactly.
There was dead silence. She was like, wait, what? And I was like, what actually gives you pleasure? What do you go to and it feels good and you leave and you feel good and gives you like lights you up inside? She was like, wait, I'm allowed to just do that?
Yeah.
Right? The conditioning that we've gotten about it has to be punitive in order for it to be beneficial is so deeply
Yeah.
ingrained.
And it has to be painful. It has to be difficult. It has to be for a long time. None of that is true, by the way. The research shows that any movement can confer health benefits. There's research about 1 minute of vigorous activity a week.
Right.
So there's no reason, like this idea that it has to be more. And that also comes from diet culture, right? Because in truth, movement can have a lot of health benefits, but it's not going to make us thinner. That's what we know. Long term, people might lose a little weight short term, but most of them are gaining it back long term. And so the prescription has been, well, if you're not losing weight, then you have to do more and more and more. And that again has created this toxic fitness culture. And another thing that I think is important. So I think my community, Weight Neutral Health, Health at Every Size, which is an ASDA trademark, tends to focus too much on joyful movement. And I am all for joyful movement, right? Moving because it's fun, because it creates joy. That is a completely valid relationship. For some people, though, movement is to help manage a chronic condition, like let's say blood sugar or high blood pressure. For some people, they just want the health benefits that are conferred by movement, but they don't love it, right?
Right.
They might far from love it. And so when we say it has to be joyful, for those folks for whom movement is more like laundry or dishes, it can make it feel like they're doing it wrong. And that's also like, so one of the things I'll tell people, like they'll say, I was talking with somebody, I'm a certified health coach and a bunch of other certifications. And so they were saying like, I know that this helps me manage my blood sugar, but I just like dread it and I hate it. And I was like, cool, like you don't have to do it, but like what helps? And they're like, well, I notice if I do like 5 or 10 minutes after a meal, it really like brings down the blood sugar spike. And I was like, okay, what if you just figured out something that you hate doing the least and then you did 5 minutes of it, right? The thing you hate the least for the bare minimum amount of time. And like the amount of stress that took off their shoulders and the whole new vision that like, no, that's valid, right? You're getting what you want. You're doing something you want to do and you don't have to do more of it.
You know, there's a thread in what you're talking about, right? There's external pressure, there's internal pressure, obviously, all the time. But there's this other thread, which I keep hearing and you're known for, which is really being an advocate for those who really struggle with health issues and those who just don't even know they're suffering, but they have health issues. And I'm wondering if you can take us through just a little bit how you got to this journey of being such a, I think, staunch health advocate for those that need it. And I don't know if that's really the term, you may have another term for it, and how you got to co-authoring and creating the Health at Every Size health sheets, which I think are vitally important.
Well, for sure. Thank you so much. So before we do any of this, I want to contextualize by saying that I want to be clear. Health is not an obligation. It's not a barometer of worthiness, and it's far from being entirely within our control. And so my focus is on
That's for sure.
that I'm never trying to create a definition of health to put people in or out of.
Right.
It's so individualized, right? So for me, it's about saying, what's your definition and your priority around health? And how can we make sure you have access to the things that you want and need to get that done? That's my focus when we talk about health. It's never like people need to do X, Y, Z, or this is or isn't healthy. And so actually I came to all of this work. I was yo-yo dieting for years. And I decided to find the best diet, the diet with the highest efficacy, and do that. And I decided to do that via a literature review of the weight loss research. And I wasn't in school. I didn't publish. I got no credit. I had a corporate job. This is just the kind of mega nerd that I am in my life, that this is how I solve my problems. And so I did this literature review and I found that there was not a single study where more than a tiny fraction of people actually succeeded at significant long-term weight loss. And I was so shocked and disbelieving and defensive about that I did that entire literature review a second time. So hours and hours of work. And so that gave me what I think is, because my background in education obviously is research methods and statistics. And so that gave me a really solid platform of like, oh, this is not going to work, right? As a fan of math and logic, trying to lose weight is no longer the way that I'm going to go to try to be healthy. I don't know how we got here, but I'm not going to do it. And this is a little over 20 years ago now.
Sure.
And so that sent me down this rabbit hole, which is how I kind of became an expert on the research around weight stigma and weight science and health and healthcare, and developed a secondary sort of subspecialty in how the weight loss industry has been for decades infiltrating and manipulating the healthcare industry.
Ragen, do me one favor for our listeners and those who may be watching us on YouTube and seeing all of our backgrounds behind us.
Awesome sauce.
Tell me, how do you define weight science? Because I think it's misunderstood.
Yeah. So for me, when I talk about weight science, it's the science that looks at weight and health and those intersections. So it can be weight loss research. It can be weight stigma and health research, but it's that body of research that looks at weight and health. And a lot of it is truly terrible. Like you would fail freshman research methods if you tried this technique. Terrible.
Right.
And yeah, so it's a sort of sad area of research to be an expert in.
So continue your journey on to how you got to the health sheets. Yeah.
When I started my original blog, Dances with Fat, I was just sort of writing about my own experiences as a fat ballroom dancer, and then kind of started writing more and more about larger themes. And because of my background in research methods and stats, I started writing about the research. And that's sort of where my work has pivoted almost entirely now. I write about that specifically. Yes. And so one of the things that I was like, people really need some way to see like, okay, if I got this condition, this health issue, what's the weight neutral option for me? And so, because what I heard from a lot of people was they were going along great on their personal weight neutral health journey, but then they got a diagnosis.
Right.
And at that point they were like, oh, I must have done weight neutral health wrong, or weight neutral health doesn't work, or, oh, it's definitely because I'm fat and this is what they said would happen. And all of that is nonsense, but it's diet culture, right?
Right. And my doctor told me to lose weight, that would be the panacea to all my problems.
Yeah. Which is, we get it all the time. Diagnosis, fat, prescription weight loss, telling people to eat less and exercise more when you have no idea how much they eat or how much they exercise. This is not ethical evidence-based medicine. And doctors aren't doing it because there are some doctors who are just tons of explicit weight stigma, right? This is just their thing. But for most, they're well-meaning, but misinformed. And that's what most clueless. Of my work is about.
Misinformed is very kind of you. I would just say clueless. So I want to just, before we even get all the way down the end of your story, I want to stop there, because for people who are going to the doctor and saying, hey, this is what's going on with me. And the doctor says, well, if you just lose weight, what's a one-liner that they can say? What's a way in the moment when they're in that like, oh my gosh, maybe I did do it wrong?
The question that I use, and I'm sure that people have used this before me, but the one I use is, what do you do for thin people with this issue? Because thin people get all the same health issues as fat people. So losing weight can neither be a sure preventative nor a sure cure.
You ever tried to have this conversation at a cocktail party? It doesn't go well. No, it just doesn't go well. No, seriously. I mean, even the most intelligent, informed people, whether they're in the medical profession or not, have such difficulty wrapping their minds around what we're saying here, which I'm freeze framing here for a moment because it's so important. That no, body size is not the determining factor in your health. It just isn't. Yeah. And so I can't tell you how many people say to me, clinicians and laymen alike, so you're telling me that if I have knee issues and I go to the orthopedist and the orthopedist says, the first thing I would do is take off X amount of pounds because it's just physics. That's what's affecting your knee. You realize that most people will say, well, that makes perfect sense, except that it doesn't.
Right.
Because what would they tell that person with the same exact injury who might be in a smaller body and have that thin privilege? What are they going to tell them then? Because that's what they should be saying to everyone first.
Exactly.
And this It's a
Yeah.
very difficult concept for a lot of people.
And I just want to go back, Ragen, because we didn't explain what the health sheets are and how they actually can help in exactly this scenario that Jennie's talking about. So would you, because you'll do it better, can you explain what those health sheets are, what those nuggets of brilliance are?
Sure. And I'll finish it out real quick. So in deciding to do the health sheets, I reached out to Dr. Louise Metz and to Tiana Dodson, who are people I had worked with before who do incredible work. And so as a team, we created these sheets. And they are diagnosis specific, weight neutral guides for handling various conditions. So you can literally go and download like type 2 diabetes or fatty liver or high blood pressure and see what are some weight neutral options and how does fat phobia often enter this conversation. There's also a resource and research bank. So if you want to dig into the research yourself, that's there. And there are resources. Like I have cards to print out and take to the doctor. There are the Don't Weigh Me cards. There's a lot of cool resources there. And then we have basically a one sheet of why we don't recommend weight loss that kind of takes you through the argument. And then to go back to Jennie, to your point with the knee, this is really a double whammy because what happens is a thin person goes in with acute knee pain and they get a whole bunch of options for what they could do, right? Physical therapy, massage, various things. A fat person goes in with the exact same acute knee pain and they leave with the prescription to lose weight. So they exercise on
with no support.
And we know from 100 years of data that there's almost no chance that they're going to actually lose significant weight long term. What they are going to probably do is exercise on an acute knee injury. Then they will make that knee injury chronic. Then that chronic knee injury will be blamed on their weight and not in the inequality in their healthcare. And this is the vicious cycle in healthcare. It creates weight stigma and weight cycling and healthcare inequalities, all of which are correlated with the same issues that get blamed on being higher weight.
This is brilliant. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in our practices.
Yeah. So it creates that weight stigma, weight cycling, and healthcare inequalities. And then it blames fat bodies for the negative outcomes that result. And then it uses those negative outcomes to create more weight stigma and weight cycling and healthcare inequalities. So it's just a vicious cycle built on this lie that the weight loss industry works very hard to create that significant long-term weight loss is one, possible, and two, will create health benefits, neither of which is supported by evidence, right? And which is two different things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I just want to say one thing about that going to the doctor. So I worked with a wonderful woman who went to the doctor armed with. So what would you say to someone who was in a smaller body? And the response back from the doctor was, I wouldn't be having this conversation if you were in a smaller body. At which point I was mortified and then very grateful because on the same day she went to another doctor. She just had a series of appointments that day. Said what the first doctor said. And that second doctor said, that's not true. Lots of people in small bodies have this health condition, right? So I'm just telling that as like the cautionary tale of when a physician pushes back, don't buy it.
Yeah. And when a physician pushes back, what we often tell folks is to actually give them the website for the health sheets because I think they communicate in a way that's very approachable for we who are laymen, but also for medically trained people. They make sense. They're hard to refute. Yeah. So we're very grateful that you were part of that, to say the least.
Yeah. And Ragen, I just want to appreciate your brain because I live in the land of, my background is as a therapist. So in the land of feelings and the parts of us that are, get involved in why we're eating and how we feel. And so having your data back me up, I am eternally grateful because I can be like, okay, this is not just a feeling. Yeah. This is a fact. This is not just like a concept that's floating. Let's look at the data. And here are some documents that will help ground this work.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm so glad that the health sheets are helpful in the work that you do, which is so critically important. And it's the whole thing. I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like my whole career is like a dream job I wish didn't exist.
Yes.
Like, given the world we
Yeah.
live in, I'm
Oh
doing
my
exactly
gosh,
what I
so
want to
get
be
that.
doing, but I wish that instead I could live in a world without weight stigma and just be like a mediocre stand-up comic. That's the goal, the dream.
I think you'd be more than mediocre, I just
Oh
want
my
to say.
gosh.
Thank you.
Or you might be ballroom dancing
No.
professionally.
But
Who
yeah,
knows?
it's so frustrating.
never know.
And like, for a doctor to say I wouldn't be having this conversation is absolutely false, and they know it.
Mhm.
And that's when we cross the line from implicit unconscious bias to explicit bias and paternalism, right? This person in front of me is fat, so obviously they can't make a decision. So instead of giving them ethical, evidence-based medicine and informed consent, I'm going to do whatever it takes to convince them to do the thing that I think is best for them. That's exactly how you don't want to be practicing medicine. And unfortunately,
No.
for fat folks, that's what we get a lot of.
It is. And I want to point at an issue that you just brought up, that idea of like that paternal infantilizing duality that happens, right? I know better, you
Yes.
don't know. And not only does that happen in the medical community, but it happens just if you go to a bookstore and look for a book about well-being, right? Oh, here's this whole 5 rows of books of experts who somehow know my body better than I
Right.
do. And our culture continues this attitude of us being infants and having no agency and no wisdom in our own body. And what you're doing and what we're all doing is saying, no, you have this wisdom and you get to be the
Yeah.
expert here.
You know, I heard a recent interview with Gloria Steinem, God love her, who's 90. She said, in essence, I'm not quoting her directly, that she was talking about reproductive health care, but I think it applies to all healthcare, and certainly it applies to weight neutrality, that it all stems from racism, and it all stems from patriarchy, and it stems from trying to keep the masses quiet.
Yeah.
And we are anything but quiet on this subject.
Yeah.
And certainly you are not quiet on this subject, thankfully.
No, very loud. Well, weight stigma in general, the idea of pathologizing bodies because they're higher weight in general, body mass index in specific, these things are rooted in and inextricable from racism and anti-Blackness. And that's not my scholarship. I'm not trying to white-splain racism to anyone, but please read folks from this community. Sabrina Strings, Fearing the Black Body, Deshaun Harrison, Belly of the Beast, Sonia Renee Taylor, The Body is Not an Apology, Dr. Joy Cox, Fat Girls in Black Bodies, and E.K. Delphine on Fat and Faith. Jessica Wilson, It's Always Been Ours. There are so many incredible books, and I really recommend people understand this, especially people who, like me, I have a lot of privilege. If you're not watching on YouTube, white privilege, cisgender, currently able-bodied, currently neurotypical, and more. And so understanding these things is incredibly important to us because we're not living it every day.
Ragen, one of the other things I think you've had a very big impact is in actually going to some medical setting and talking about why one need not feel like that setting was not made for them. It's not their fault. From the size of blood pressure cuffs to
Size of the
chairs in the
chair.
waiting room, all of that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that and what's a reasonable expectation for folks when they go into any kind of medical setting?
Yeah. So structural weight stigma is what we're talking about now. And this is when things that higher weight people need, whether it's a chair, a blood pressure cuff, an MRI machine, et cetera, either don't exist to accommodate them or don't exist in that specific space to accommodate them. And I think a reasonable expectation is that a center that's built for healthcare should accommodate all the people who exist. Right. I don't think it's reasonable to ever walk into a healthcare thing and say, well, of course they don't have a blood pressure cuff for me. Right. No, that's not reasonable. And so when we experience that kind of weight stigma, structural weight stigma, like all weight stigma requires systemic change, but structural weight stigma can only be solved with systemic change because you can have a fully fat affirming provider, a fully fat affirming patient, but if the MRI is too small, that patient cannot get care. They cannot get the MRI, and that could be a matter of life and death. And so,
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I always say, Jennie, what you were saying as well, is that when we experience that, it becomes our problem immediately, but it is not and never was and never will be our fault.
Right. Such an important distinction.
Yeah.
You know, it's also
Right. It becomes our problem, but it's
Yes.
not our fault.
Exactly.
And you can say that part a million times, that it's not our fault, because we've been really sucked into this idea that somehow we're to blame. And it's so important to reinforce a million times over, this is not your fault. You didn't do it wrong.
And I guarantee you there are some folks listening who are thinking, yeah, I get all of that. But when I have to go onto a plane and I don't necessarily only worry about whether the doors are going to blow off, I'm also thinking about, should I or should I not ask for a seatbelt extender? Should I or should I not perhaps even buy
another seat
so that I can actually be comfortable? Oh, no, I can't do that because others will judge, others will point fingers. And again, we're talking about safety again. This is still about safety.
Yeah.
And so, can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. And I mean, it's really tough, right? Because weight stigma is real, right? People may judge, people may make nasty comments. Like that can happen. That's not an uncommon occurrence. And so for me, what I realized after my whole journey was that I had spent my lifetime fighting my own body on behalf of weight stigma. And that I wanted to do instead is fight weight stigma on behalf of my body.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so when I started to see my body as a friend and a partner who deserved my full-throated support, right, who deserved my gratitude, then I started being much more comfortable and much more loud. I ask for a seatbelt extender as loudly as I humanly possibly can to try to normalize it for other people. When they try to hand it to me like we're doing some kind of illicit deal, I'm like, oh, thank you for the extender. Like I am loud about it, right? And that's also an example of, I think, more privilege, more work. Again, I have a ton of privilege in this area, and so I'm going to use it as much as I can. Also, the buying 2 seats is patently ridiculous because here's the thing. What the airline is selling is a flight from point A to point B. In order to take that flight, you must have a seat that accommodates you. So it's not that fat people are asking for something special. We're asking for exactly what every single other person on that plane has, which is a seat that accommodates them for the same ticket price. The fact that they keep making the seats smaller, they knew fat people existed when they made those planes. They knew fat people existed when they made those policies. Southwest Airlines gives you as many seats as you need for the same ticket price. In Canada, 1 passenger, 1 fare is the law. So the idea that like the whole airline industry would collapse if they had to equally accommodate people is patently untrue, just absolute nonsense. But beyond that, because I used to believe that. I used to be like, like it's like USPS. If it fits, it ships. And if I don't fit in the seat, then I should have to pay for 2. And then when I thought about it, I was like, well, hold on. Like, why?
You see what you're talking about too, which is how the external becomes the internal, right? All of that weight stigma and all of those opinions sort of get swallowed whole. And I say that quite pointedly. And I think the value of your work, to say it just briefly because it's so far reaching, is really to start to give people the idea that, you know what, I actually can have a voice. And if I don't think I can, there are others who actually have my back too. But can I also be inspired by them? Can I learn from them? Can I find that part of me which will speak up so that I don't have to be doing an illicit deal and drowning in shame? I think that's so much of the impact that so much of your work thus far has had, I must say.
Yeah. You're talking about having not just an empowering conversation and relationship with our own body, but amplifying that into the world so that we are inviting other people into acting on our behalf, speaking on our behalf, including in the way that we need to be included. So, Ragen, I'm wondering as we wrap up, if you would tell folks how to find you, what you're up to right now, all the important details.
Hang on a second. Everybody who's listening, you got to get a pen because there's a lot of ways for you to reach her. You don't want to miss any of them. We're going to try to put some of them on our website too, but you don't want to miss them.
I'll try to keep it brief. So you can find me on Instagram at Ragen Chastain. You can find me on Substack. weightandhealthcare.com is my newsletter, and I write about these things endlessly there.
It's a great newsletter, I have to say.
Thank you so much. And then I do a lot of like deep dive analyses and also like thoughts about healthcare. And then danceswithfat.org is my original blog. There's still like 1,800 blog posts there. And it's also the home of my monthly workshop. So I do a monthly workshop that's online, and it's always, there's a pay what you can afford option. There's a video that goes out. And so people can see the library of ones that are already done and see whatever I'm doing whenever you happen to be listening to this.
Brilliant. I just want to thank you, Ragen,
Fantastic.
not only for being with us today, but for the work that you do that really has a tremendous impact on folks. And I hope will continue to have an impact truly on the medical industry. That's really where so much of the education must take place. And I know so much of your effort goes into that. I know you speak at conferences, and that would make my stomach turn. I'd be so nervous, but you do it anyway. It's really important work, and we're so grateful.
Thank you so much. I'm right back at you. I'm super grateful for the work that you do in your individual work and on the podcast. And thanks for letting me be a little part of that. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ragen.
We're so glad you joined us on this episode of Body Peace.
Stay connected as we continue exploring what it means to live in your body with more ease, trust, and care by subscribing to Body Peace on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen.
Be sure to visit us at bodypeacepodcast.com for special bonus content for those on our mailing list.